For the last 16 years, this is how I've injected prescribed testosterone. But 60 days ago, I made a change, and here's what happened. This is my prescribed medication, doctor supervised, not medical advice. For those of you who are new here, I'm TR. I'm a 62-year-old personal trainer and nutrition coach. I've been on physician-prescribed testosterone replacement therapy since 2010 after being diagnosed with clinically low testosterone. Over those years, I've learned a lot, some things the hard way, but recently I made one change that I honestly wish I had explored much sooner. Instead of injecting once a week into muscle, I've been doing much smaller daily injections into subcutaneous fat. Today I want to tell you why I made that decision, what surprised me, what hasn't, and whether I think it's actually worth considering. This is not medical advice. It is simply my personal experience with a treatment that was prescribed to me by my physician and the delivery method change that we implemented. So if something has worked for 16 years, why change it? Like they say, if it ain't broke. Honestly, I wasn't looking for better results. I love what TRT does for me in so many ways, but I had started asking myself a little different question. Am I going to keep sticking a large needle into the same muscle injection site areas week after week, year after year, for the rest of my life? So if I live into my 80s, that's literally more than 1,000 times. And I started wondering, what is that doing to my tissue? Scar tissue doesn't just look bad, it messes with absorption. You could be injecting the exact same amount every time and getting inconsistent results just because mainly your body can't take it up the same way through fibrous or scar tissue. So that got me thinking, could there be another way that was just as effective but a little easier on my body and easier on me mentally? That was the discussion I had a few months ago with my doctor at my last visit. The biggest difference isn't actually the medication, it's where it goes. Traditional injections are intramuscular, meaning the medication is injected directly into muscle tissue, but subcutaneous injections, or sub-Q, are when you place the medication into a layer of fat that's just underneath your skin. It's the same medication, the same preparation, it's just delivered differently. For many people, including all of those who take insulin every day, this type of injection has been used safely for years. The question is whether it can also be a good option for testosterone. That's what I wanted to find out for myself. So the first thing that surprised me was the needle itself. Honestly, I couldn't believe how small it was, and I admit it made me skeptical. In my mind, I kept thinking, there is no way this tiny needle is going to work the same as injecting a larger one straight into my muscle. So before I ever even tried it, I spent quite a bit of time reading the research and talking with my doctor. I wanted to be confident that I wasn't changing how effective the medication was going to be, just the way in which it was being delivered. Once I understood that, I decided to give it a try. And after 60 days, I can tell you the thing that surprised me the most wasn't the science, it was how easy it was to do it this way. So the routine actually becomes easier. Instead of one day every week where I had to stop what I was doing, prepare everything, and get mentally ready, I found that this way, it had just become another part of my morning routine. I stopped getting behind. With weekly injections, life happens. Vacation, busy week, work. Suddenly it's day 9. But with a daily pattern, there is not an injection day anymore. There's just morning. My workouts didn't feel any different, for better or for worse. But remember, I didn't change my prescribed weekly amount. The only thing I changed was how frequently it was being administered. Simply dividing the dosage by 7. My doctor and I want to see what my blood work looks like over the longer term. We want to see where my testosterone levels stabilize. We want to see if there's any meaningful differences over 6 months or a year. 60 days is enough, though, I think, to share my first impressions, but not enough to make any kind of sweeping conclusions. If you're already on TRT and you've heard people talking about daily injections, hopefully this will give you another perspective to discuss with your physician. If you are someone who's been putting off TRT because you're terrified of long needles, that fear might not match the reality anymore. That mental block is the single biggest reason clients I talk to about TRT say that they would never start. It just sounds too drastic. I bet if it was a pill to swallow each day, there'd be a lot more men who are willing to give TRT a try. So the important thing is not to copy that guy that's on YouTube. The important thing is to have an informed conversation with the healthcare provider who's managing your treatment. My setup is simple now. I draw a week's worth of vials all at once and I keep them in my bathroom medicine cabinet. I am intentionally not walking through dosing or injection techniques because those discussions should always be based on your own prescription and your physician's guidance. If you had asked me 60 days ago, I probably would have said that this is just another experiment. But today, I honestly don't think I'm going to go back because for me, it has become much easier, less intimidating, and something I simply don't have to think about anymore. That alone has made it worthwhile. The problem with the old way is you're hitting the same quadrants, even if you're rotating around, hitting them week after week, year after year, and scar tissue can form. The first thing that surprised me about this new way was the syringe. For IM, you're using something bigger, less precise, but for sub-Q, microdosing if you will, you're using a much smaller barrel and a much smaller needle, usually about a ½ inch. One thing that confused me at first was that the gauge numbers work backwards. The higher the gauge number, the thinner the needle. They are often called insulin syringes just because that's the most common thing that most people are familiar with. But a smaller barrel means the graduation lines are tighter together, which means it's way more accurate at small volumes. On a standard insulin syringe, the whole barrel is marked in units instead of milliliters. And I think that this can trip people up sometimes, so here's the translation. 1 full milliliter equals 100 units. So if you're drawing 0.1 ml, that's 10 units on the syringe. Same math every time, you just move the decimal. The second thing that nobody explained to me at first is that oil-based hormone is thick, and the shaft on these needles is much narrower than I was used to. So before you draw anything, you pull back the plunger to the amount you're about to take and inject that air into the vial first. Then flip it upside down, and now it draws clean and even. No fighting against a vacuum. Also, some compounding pharmacies offer the medication suspended in MCT oil instead, which is thinner, less irritating, and for a lot of guys, noticeably less soreness after the shot. It's not a simple swap though. You need a doctor who's willing to write you the prescription that way. Mine did. One other detail that actually matters for accuracy, you measure your dose from the very top edge of the black rubber part of the plunger, not the tip, not the shoulder of the plunger, the top edge lined up with your mark. It's a small thing, but it's the difference between a consistent dose and a guess. Once you're done, recap the needle carefully. Don't go hunting for the cap with your other hand pointed towards the needle because that one will hurt. And don't toss it in the trash. Even if it's capped, it's too easy for someone to be pushing down in the garbage and poke themselves with an unclean needle. Pharmacies usually give out for free or cheap what's called a Sharps container. No excuse not to have one. I just use an empty protein container that's clearly marked. So at 60 days, what are the pros and the cons? Well, one of the pros is that I stopped dreading injection day. And I know that probably sounds ridiculous after 16 years, but every week there was just still this little mental hurdle. I'd think, okay, it's time to go do my shot. But now I brush my teeth, I do my injection, done. So the fear barriers basically disappeared. You're matching your daily rhythm versus the big weekly peak and crash feeling. I genuinely didn't notice that a great deal anyway, but I know that this is much easier on my system. Also, there is no more repeated trauma to one site. Pushing through scar tissue is an unsettling feeling. And the last pro, I think, is that it takes literally less than 5 seconds of my morning routine. The only thing faster is combing my hair. The cons, though, it requires daily discipline. For some people, it may be too easy to forget a daily habit versus a weekly ritual. Also, there's more frequent needle sticks. Even though they're smaller and they're painless, you are now injecting 365 times instead of 52 in a year. And the last con, I think, is that somehow, even though it adds up to the same dosage every week, for some reason, doing one big injection, it just felt like I was doing something, like it felt meaningful, if that makes any sense, but maybe that's just a glimpse into my head, I guess. If you have tried sub-Q injections, I would love to hear about your experiences down in the comments. And if you're just beginning your TRT journey, what questions do you still have? I'm happy to try and answer them. And I hope this video helped. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.